We can go ahead and get started. I'm Anna with Shop Local Raleigh, and we are very excited to have James Vann here with us today to tell us um, kind of some new rules, new laws, things that might affect your business. Give us some good information. Vann Attorneys at Law has been in practice since, what'd you say, almost 30 years, James?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So knows North Carolina law well, very, very accomplished lawyer. So we are very thankful to have him here today. If you guys have any questions during the session, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will make sure James sees those and gets around to answering those during the session. And if you have any questions afterwards, I know I always think of things kind of after the fact. He has been so gracious to offer that he will gladly take any questions via email, over the phone, at no charge to anybody. So we're very thankful for that offer, James.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to you and let you get started.
Thank you so much, Anna. And thanks for the opportunity to be with Shop Local Raleigh. Um, and we were talking when we first got started, as an attorney, I don't know that I can add a whole lot to the membership, but this is one of the things we try to do. We do these kinds of webinars for a large group of business owners across really much the Southeast U.S. So it is an honor to do it today locally with folks here in Raleigh. And as Anna said, we really do want to help our community. And one of the ways we do that is if you have a question regarding business or that, business litigation or business ownership or legal issues having to do with the business, if you want to call or email me and just tell me that you're a member of Shop Local Raleigh, we won't bill you. We'll try to help answer your question. And if a relationship develops, then we'll tell you we're going to bill you before we do that so that you have that, hopefully that understanding. So again, we want to make this really helpful for you. And my hope and prayer, quite frankly, is that you learn something out of this, right? So the topic that we're going to be looking at today are the new laws that were enacted by the North Carolina legislature, as well as the Corporate Transparency Act, which y'all probably have heard a bunch of. And sort of has calmed down a little bit lately, but we'll catch that up to speed a little bit. So let's look at the laws that were enacted by the legislature. And again, y'all can imagine we're not looking at every law by any means. What I tried to do is go through all of the laws that were passed in 24 to early 25, and pick out things that I thought would be helpful and sort of group them together by virtue of who I think might be members of Shop Local Raleigh. So again, this we may go through some of this and it may not apply to anything that you do, and I apologize for that, but we're just trying to hit with a really wide pattern. So some of the things that were changed with the legislature, there was a lot of alcohol beverage control changes. And I've got several friends that are and clients that are in this industry, and I want to reach out to them because I'll be honest, I don't remember there being that many changes before, and so I don't know if they're really trying to grow the market or make it more amenable to business interests. I'm not sure how that's working, but so what I've done I think on all of these is it'll say like it's called the ABC Omnibus 2324 law, and then the SL stands for session law, and it gives you a number that can help you if you have a question about any of these, or if you want to research them later, you can use that session law to go actually find the legislation itself. So this was a fairly large bill that got passed, but it allows the industry members to provide up to $600 worth of retailer advertising, specialty items, and product displays per brand per year to a retail permittee. And I thought, well, maybe some of the members have an ABC permission, convenience store, maybe a restaurant, not sure. And so this obviously changed some of the law regarding the advertising and what you can accept from that. So again, that's per brand per year to a local board as well. So again, gives you a little bit, if you got a restaurant or say a bar, maybe that might be applicable. Another part of this bill allows a restaurant, a hotel, private club, bar, brewery, so forth, um, that holds an on-premises unfortified wine permit or premises fortified wine permit or mixed beverage permit to sell single-serving unfortified consumption for alcohol for consumption off the premises, including delivery by either the mixed beverages permittee or delivery service. In essence, you can have a drink delivered to your house now uh, by delivery service. And I have seen that happen. And I was thinking, like, we were in a restaurant and I saw, I'm like, but again, it's got to be there are laws about how they do it, or it's got to be closed, it's got to be a sealed container. And when I first saw it, I thought, what in the world? And then I realized later that they changed the law. So you may see that right in stores or grocery stores, excuse me, restaurants or bars. You'll see the delivery folks come in and pick up stuff and take it out, and you go, "Oh my gosh!" So you just hope that your teenage children don't get a hold of this, right? So, and they're supposed to verify age. I'm sure they all do.
James,
So,
are you
yeah,
okay if we ask questions as we maybe have some of them? Because,
absolutely.
sorry, interrupt. This is Jennifer at Shop Local. And just to question you, so really, a lot of our restaurants, our local restaurants and breweries in town could set up with, like, let's say DoorDash, a delivery program.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And this bill obviously goes in greater detail about how to do that and who can do it, and then like it has to be in a sealed, unopened, and the container has to be remain unopened during delivery. So there's a lot more detail to it, Jennifer, but it's that this does allow that to happen. So, and just for those folks who may be in the business of selling alcohol, and y'all know this. If you don't, then there are a wide variety of different um, uh, license that people can hold to sell, right, alcohol. So it's all kinds of variances in that. So one of the other thing I thought this was really interesting, right? And I'm sure we've seen some of these, right? It creates a mobile bar service permit that can be issued to a business that provides bartending services for events. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool, right? I mean, I think why that was not permitted before, I'm not sure, but the permit authorizes to be able to sell alcohol that is not an ABC permittee to serve alcohol beverages to guests at an event. So mobile bar services have been approved. So again, it's really interesting. I think that the ABC Commission, and I presume they were part of it, but the legislature is taking these changes on. So I know we've got a couple of businesses locally that have a similar type feel, but this is allowing the mobile bar. So I don't know, I'm sure if y'all ever been to like the Bahamas and you see the boats that are what do they call them? It's basically a floating bar on a boat. The first time I saw it, I'm like, dang, that is a great idea. So not sure how we'll incorporate that in Raleigh, but so there was another change that allows a 15-year-olds to work inside of a premises that sells alcohol. Obviously, some of the restrictions, they can't work in a role involving the preparation, serving, dispensing, or sale of alcohol beverages. And then again, that's allows 15-year-olds to work it. I guess before that, I know if they sold alcohol, they weren't allowed at all. So let's look at some commercial law applications that were changed. So I know we probably have some roofing companies, I bet, that are members. So the predatory roofing insurance rebate is how they define this. It requires contracts for residential roof replacements or repair to have a 5 business day cancellation period following an insurance claim denial for the work to be performed under the contract. So really what this was going after is some of the storm chasers is how they are typically referred to. Like if we were to have a major, say, tornado or just bad weather here, right? And it happens a lot at the beach as well. You wind up having folks coming in from all over the country and they're typically referred to as storm chasers to redo your roof. And some of those people are not very reputable. They will, bill you for a large project, deliver, under deliver from that, and then the insurance companies get stuck with it, and or the homeowner. So this required the contract for those to have a 5-day cancellation period if the insurance claim had been denied. That is, for example, let's say a lot of times what they'll do is they'll get the insurance company to try to buy into having pay for the new roof. And if the insurance company has denied that, that gives the homeowner 5 days to get out of it, out of the contract. So um, another change in the commercial law for allows for a seller to repossess a manufactured sign. And y'all, this was really interesting. I want to find out the history. Even if the sign is fixed to the real property, if the buyer fails to pay in violation of the contract with the seller and the seller doesn't breach. So think about this, right? I'm thinking about Hillsborough Street. Um, Company hires a sign company to manufacture and install a sign out front. They don't pay for it. This allows the sign company to go back out and take it off the property. That is so far from other having to do with other laws regarding commercial upfit of buildings or building of buildings. The typical law is once something is affixed to the property, you can, even if they breach the contract, they hadn't paid for it, all of it, you can't take it off, right? It's there. This is a pretty far deviation from that standard. So again, what this tells me, and should tell y'all from a standpoint, they had really good lobbyists at the legislature, right? So the whoever the sign manufacturers were had a great lobbyists to get this passed. But again, just something I thought was pretty interesting, especially if you make signs or if you are in a business that is having a sign put on their building and for some reason just decide not to pay for it. So, all right, the Department of Labor, they had a fairly large bill, and so one aspect of it allows for electronic communication as a form of notice under the youth employment statutes, elevator statutes, amusement device. Beforehand, you could not you couldn't communicate with them electronically in a legal perspective. Now it's allowing that to happen. What's really interesting, right, is if you had a Department of Labor dispute, whether or not they will initially follow up with you or reach out to you electronically by email, or if it will be by mail. Typically, it's always been by mail. And then later, the email communication may go back and forth. Um, I didn't see in this law that it addressed that. But about you, but I mean, if you got something from a governmental agency by email, you probably are going to ignore it because you think it's spam. So it'll be interesting to see. I haven't read all of it, all of that law yet, but that's just a part of it. There was another issue about the Department of Labor having to do with the increase of range of civil penalties for wage and hour act record keeping violations. Elizabeth Berry, who is a well-respected CPA, as part of this call today or this webinar, and I know she probably has seen it, I bet, with clients, and we certainly do as well for business owners. And most of it's unintentional, right? The record keeping really is important. And I know you all know that because you obviously keep up with your business, but being able to keep the records properly is really important. And if you don't do that, then the fines have now gone up, right? And it also allows for electronic communication with the Department of Labor as well. Again, it didn't say initially but it just approved it in general. So hopefully none of you will have any personal interaction with this piece of law, but just something to know. And then some regulatory reforms. It exempts certain employees whose duties are confined to shampooing or blow drying from having to becoming licensed as a barber or cosmetologist. And as I was reading that, I was thinking, never thought about that. So obviously, if you're a member and you are in the barber or cosmetology sector, it now exempts employees whose job is to shampoo or blow dry from having a license. So hopefully that helps. Also for a someone who is doing a massage or body work therapist, it increases the number of hours that they have to have for supervised instructions from 5 to 650. And I did a little bit of research to find out what body work therapist is, and I didn't get an answer. So if anybody knows, let me know. I'm not sure what that includes, but nonetheless, your hours went up for supervised instruction. Also requires a secondary ticket exchange, ticket issuer or reseller to meet certain requirements when issuing a ticket for sale. And the reason I thought this might be important was, and again, we don't know every member of the shop local Raleigh, but I was thinking because of NC State and the hurricanes and just stuff around us, I doubt anybody is buying secondary tickets. But if you are, it now requires a secondary ticket exchange to have certain requirements and disclosures as to what the original price was and if there's any other fees involved from the price to the point of sale to a individual. But again, I'm not sure if that really applies to a member or not, but I thought it might be. So one of the things we wanted to go over was the Corporate Transparency Act. The Secretary of State, by the way, does not oversee that. That was just a photo that we added in. And y'all have probably heard these things before under the Corporate Transparency Act. Many of the small business owners were required initially to file corporate transparency reports and records showing the beneficial ownership of the company. And the purpose initially was to combat illicit activity like tax fraud, money laundering, financing of terrorism, and so forth. And they had initially had different deadlines set up. Currently, there is no filing deadline. There have been some court proceedings that have stayed the Corporate Transparency Act. And what was really interesting, I know Elizabeth, are you doing these for members or for your clients, or are you staying out of that?
I'm sending an email to each one, or I did last year before they stayed the filing, but I sent an email to let everybody know that they have to file it and let them do it themselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much for letting us know. It really is, you had to get the information and then provide it in a website. A lot of people, a lot of business owners were not very happy because you had to share some personal information. Uh, Quite frankly, I feel like the government already knows it anyway. It's just you're sharing it with another group. Nonetheless, there was a lot of pushback across the nation, and a judge has stayed all of that. So right now there is no deadline. And one of the things that Ann and I were talking about earlier is we would try to keep the shop local Raleigh group and members up to speed on law changes having to do with business owners. So right now you don't have to worry about it. And some people ask me, should we still comply? You certainly can. You still can set up an account if you don't have one and provide the information, but you're under no deadline and you're under no specific date as to when you have to do that or whether you have to do it at all. But that's sort of the general gist of it right now. I want to go back to a couple things. We've got a little bit of extra time, and just share some things. This is not just necessarily new laws, but it's the things that we see and the things I've seen recently that I hope will help you and your business. We've got a client, really, really smart client, who has a business to business relationship and with a vendor, and they had an agreement initially about how the transactions would work going back and forth, right? Services versus payment. And then the services grew substantially over COVID. They didn't change the paperwork. And the customer asked our client to take on more work, which they obviously were gladly willing to do because they were going to get paid for it. But they struck up a different payment arrangement for it, but never put that in writing. And the customer company is undergoing some pretty substantial changes. And our client called the other day and I said, "Hey, look, this is what's going on. What do you think should we do?" Right? And I'm thinking, number one, we should try to put this in writing. I said, "What would happen if you sent an email to outline, right, the conversation and the agreement that y'all had reached around 2020?" And our client said, hey, they won't go for it. They will pick that up and realize that that's what we're trying to get them to agree to. Because so far, they basically have said, we didn't agree to that because it was verbal. Now, side note, verbal contracts, verbal agreements are enforceable, right? You can take that to court. The difficulty is you have one company says one thing, the other says another. You got to prove which one, what the facts are, right? What the agreement was. So back to our story, the client said, "I don't think they'll go for that. They'll pick up on that, realizing that we're trying to document the agreement and arrangement that we agreed to." So the moral of this story is to put it in writing. Get a writing. If initially contracts, right, get those in writing. If the contract changes, get it in writing. And I promise you, an email works, right? There's two pieces of legislation. One's called e-sign and one is called UETA. It's UETA. One is federal, one is state. And both of them basically stand for the premise that with a few exceptions, real estate transfers and estate issues, for the most part, electronic communications, email, text messages, even voicemail can bind individuals and companies to the terms, whatever those were, right? So if you and I are emailing back and forth, trying to come up with a contract or an agreement as to how we'll provide legal services, right? And what the cost will be, that's binding. That's just as good if it was in paper, right? It doesn't matter. Even if it's in an email or if it's in a text message. And I tell this to a lot of our clients, right? Let's just say that you've worked really hard to put together a contract in writing on paper, right? You take the agreement that you've reached, you put it on paper, everybody signs it. Let's just say you sign it with a blue ink, the old-fashioned way, and everybody's good about that. Can you change it with a text message? Let's say in that contract it says that the contract can only be changed if it's agreed to by both parties in writing. You've probably read that, right, in contracts before. You think, hey, no problem. I've got a contract in writing, right? We signed it with blue ink, white paper, and then I'm going to be communicating with the customer by my cell phone in a text. The question is, does your text change or could your text change the written contract? It can, because the text is considered to be in writing, even though it's electronic. It's electronic communication, electronic transactions, and it can change the paper form. So the reason I share that with our clients is, just to really be thinking about what you text with your vendors or your customers or whoever you have on a contract with, to be really careful and to teach your staff, right, and your other folks in your office to be really careful, especially those who have the authority to bind your company legally, right? So I hope that makes sense. So let me ask you this. Are there any questions? And I've got a few other topics we can go over before we end up. Any questions y'all have?
James, I have just a general question. As we discussed previously, there's just such a mass amount of changing information constantly. What do you have any like go-to places or advice for business owners to like find the most up-to-date changes for small business owners? Like, are there any good resources that you suggest? Um,
Great question. Yes. So I would suggest the Small Business Administration, the SBA website generally is really good. Um, so is the uh, U.S. Chamber of Commerce website. They typically have information on their website about, and they generally more are focused on national changes. Um, I don't think the Wake County Chamber does not have anything on their website, unfortunately, I don't think. And I don't think the North Carolina Chamber does, I don't believe. But I would probably say the SBA, Small Business Administration website, um, and there was another group. Oh, I can't think of it right now. I'll come up with it, but it's like a small chamber, but it was again federal related. But they used to put out a lot of information on their website. I'll try to find that and get it to you. And I'll tell you another one. I mean, the Secretary of State website, they do a really good job. If there's scams that are going on, they don't necessarily publish new laws for small business owners. Um, and I started to say you can log into our website and sign up for the email newsletters. We try to hit those. I mean that would be, and I don't mean that to be self-serving, so I apologize. I don't mean it to be that way, but that's the source. But those are probably the ones I would go to. That's such a great question. Let me also mention, and it has to do sort of with the same thing about keeping good records, right? Um, we were working with a client, and they were going to make an offer to a fairly key employee, a new employee, um, and they were negotiating back and forth. They submitted an initial offer verbally to this potential new employee, and they had a little bit of back and forth negotiating, and then they ultimately agreed to the terms that the employee did and the company. And I got a call from our client, the company, and they said, "Do you think we should put that in writing?" Yeah, absolutely. And as the employer, I would tell you to be painstakingly clear and very obvious in all of the details of the offering. And I would make sure they're in the offering after you've put all the details in there, that this includes all of the terms of the offer. So, you can do that in a sentence or a small paragraph. The reason I say that is we've had a number of clients over the years get into a dispute with an employee who had accepted an offer. They started working 6 months into it. They said, "Wait a minute, you promised me such and such." And they had a dispute, and it unfortunately went to a legal battle, right? And had they had that sentence or paragraph in their offer, it probably would have resolved it, right? Because they said if you had something like this, this is all, everything above includes everything that we've offered. We're not offering anything beyond that. It just makes it really clear, right? And the same thing on the severance. If you've got an employee that's going to leave, good terms or bad terms, I would encourage you to have a piece of paper that's documenting this is what we owe the employee, this is the basis of what we owe the employee, and then have a sentence in there that says the employee and the employer agreed that nothing else is owed. And a lot of times that will stop the claim later of, well, but you didn't pay me my vacation, or you didn't pay me my bonus, or whatever it may be. Just get you a lot of protections having that in writing. So again, hopefully that helps. I'm going to stop and ask any other questions right now.
James, I actually have one. Thank you for this. This is super helpful, this information. Do you mind going back to the beginning of the slides? You had one that was really good about some of the new changes for ABC Commission that I wanted to ask about. Just because I know that we do work with so many different restaurants and local beverage vendors.
Yeah.
Um, the
Um,
the this one right here, the advertising, they can provide up to
mhm.
$600 worth of retailer advertising, specialty items, and product displays. Does industry members, do they have to pay a fee, do you know, to be a part of the member, or are they a member by just having a permit?
I think the way they defined this was they are part of the industry by virtue of having the permit, I believe.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then second to that, the provide up to $600 worth of retail advertising, specialty items, and product displays. Is this meaning just inside of like the ABC stores, or does this mean that, like, let's say, for instance, one of our craft breweries in North Carolina wants to have a display in a restaurant, they can do this as well?
I think that's how it's written. I think, Jeff, that's a great question, but that's how I read it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I will tell you, if you're in this business, if you're in the industry selling alcohol, there is again, this omnibus bill is pretty large. And there's a lot of changes. And I think the idea was they're trying to make the accessibility, they're trying to open up the doors the way I read it, right? Because it has always been sort of locked down by the state. But it seems like they're trying to broaden it out. Now, I'm not sure if that's the ABC board that's driving it or if it's the legislature, but either way, it seems like it's opening up the relationships between the folks with permits and the ABC Commission.
For sure. For sure. I would be curious, mentioning the DoorDash type scenario, if you will. I'm not sure what their rules are, but it'd be interesting to see how old you have to be a driver for them, especially if
Yeah, and I should have, and I apologize. It's literally you're trying to take all this stuff and put it into a slideshow. Um, I don't know. That's a great question.
I was just curious because it would parlay with if they're doing delivery. I wonder if
I,
they're already
my
21
guess,
or
my guess is 21, but I mean, because at least from the North Carolina standpoint, would be my guess, but I could be way wrong on that. So that's not a legal answer, by the way.
so according to Google, it says at least 18 years old. So we'll find out. But yeah, because that could be
Yeah,
curious if they can deliver alcohol then with some of those new changes.
yeah, yeah,
So thank you. Very helpful.
yeah, absolutely. And again, as we said earlier, I think it was it? I'm trying to think which one it is. No, where you could have the mixed drink to be able to get shipped home, right? I'm like, that's really interesting to me that they're opening it up that much, right? But I think that's the new norm for us. So
Do you think part of that is coming from during COVID when the Cooper administration
maybe
allowed, okay, and they just continued it, made it permanent?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. Yeah. And again, I don't know. I've got several friends that are part of the um, ABC Commission makeup, right? The whole thing, and I really would love to have a conversation with them. I'm going to. I just didn't do it before today to find out what they're because if you look around the state, like new buildings are popping up all over the place. Like I've seen a number. I'm almost like looking for them now because I've noticed in so many towns, some of the older buildings are being either torn down or they're just leaving them and going, and they've got really, really nice space for the ABC stores now. So it's really interesting. And like the whole design inside is laid out differently. As a friend told me, by the way, somebody told me that. I'm not going to tell it myself. Um, so one of the other things that I would, just as we get ready to wrap up, I don't want, again, I'm not trying, if there's questions, let me know. I'd be glad to help answer those, either this stuff or something else. Um, is when you are working with, I'll say your vendors, right? And I keep going back to contracts. Um, if one thing I learned early on in my practice is if you have a relationship with a vendor, um, and you've obviously got tons of vendors, right? Make sure that everything that has been promised to you is in writing, right? So you can count on that, right? Um, and it's not to say that salespeople over promise, but if part of the transaction that you're hoping to achieve, and you have the contract that they give you, but the salesperson said, well, we'll do this, this, that, and the other as well. That needs to be in writing, because if that person leaves, or if they have a moment of changing a policy, and they won't let you do those things that are not in writing anymore, and that's what you base your promise, your agreement on, you're out of luck, right? So make sure that's in writing. And I can't tell you, we get tons of phone calls with people who are all across the country, but certainly across North Carolina, and most of our practice, all of our practice is really limited to North Carolina, where they'll send us contracts and we'll look at it and tell them what the case, if they have a case or not, or what it may look like, right? Or suggestions. And then sometimes they wind up hiring us, sometimes they don't. But to really look at your contracts, right? That is such a key important part as a business owner, based off of your lease. I mean, I know several members that have been a member of Shop Local Raleigh. And, I mean, I get it, right? If you're in a business and you don't, law is not your specialty, right? When you look at if you're leasing property, sometimes it's like, I found a perfect spot. I'm just going to take it. I'm going to sign the lease. And, you realize later that there are things in there that you didn't know. Actually, I had a client here earlier today who had entered into a lease. The business started to change a little bit, right? They said it was this, and because of actually during COVID, it started to shift. And it wasn't long after COVID, the major days of COVID were over. The landlord said, "You can't do that because in the lease it says you're permitted to do this, and now you're doing this." And they basically tried to kick them out. We were able to keep them in the space. But you need to know those things, right? And hopefully so that you're not spending money legally, right, to fight one way or the other on it. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Any other questions y'all have? Again, I just want to thank you so much for letting me participate with this today. And again, I'll make this offer for Shop Local Raleigh. If you're a member and you have a question that we can help answer quickly, kind of thing, without doing research or that kind of stuff, call me or email me. I'd be glad to help. But identify yourself as a Shop Local Raleigh member, please.
And James, real quick, I think we may have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Jennifer, I just had a question in relation to drivers. So you were saying that the age for DoorDash is 18. I know for GoPuff it's 21. But in thinking about that, they allow our servers to serve alcohol. They can't pour it, but they serve it. So I wonder if maybe that would be a correlation for the DoorDash drivers. But again, law is not my specialty.
I'll tell you what I'll do is I'm gonna find out that question, and I'll let you know. I'll share it with Jennifer and Anna and let y'all know that. I just don't know, but I will find out.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And James, one last thing I was curious on, what would you say is your number one issue that, if there is one, or you can narrow kind of the top 3 or 5 that you get from businesses all the time, small business owners, that they come to you? What are those?
It's probably they've sold a product or service and hadn't been paid. That's number one. Lately, in the last 5 years, it seems like there's been a dispute among business owners, right? There's fighting among the business owners. And then probably the other one is just vendor, and it goes back to payment, right? It's vendor disputes.
Very good. Thank you. It was very interesting. Lots of good information here.
Well, we'd love to help you out any way we can, and if y'all have questions, just let us know.
Thank you so much, James. This has been so helpful. And for our friend that joined us a little bit later on, James has been so kind to, as he just mentioned, but if you have any questions after this, and like I said at the beginning, I know I always think of things after the conversation is over. He is more than willing to help answer those questions via email, phone call. Just mention that you're a Shop Local Raleigh member. And we will be sending out all of this. We'll post this on YouTube. We'll send out all of our links to this in this week's member newsletter so you can share this with friends, other business owners in your communities. So we can just kind of help support everyone through all these changes that seem to always just happen. They never end. So thank you guys for being here today. Thank you again, James. We're so thankful for you. This has been so helpful. Lots and lots of good information shared today. And we will see everybody next month. Thank you.